So we're going to pick up with Japan for the rise of dictators. Hold on, let me get this into duplicate mode. There we go. Okay, so the whole rise of dictatorships throughout Europe, that's in Europe, but it's happening globally, okay? In Japan, that's the Pacific region, that's Asia. In Japan, their ruler was like a monarch, okay? And the monarch in this case is Emperor Hirohito. But most historians claim that the real power of Japan lied in the hands of the military general. And that's the man pictured on the right, General Tojo. Both of these names are spelled on the screen. So you have a monarch, okay, Emperor Hirohito. But again, most people are saying at this time, most of the power is actually in the hands of the military leader. That's General Tojo, okay? Japan, as we're going to discuss, is very militarily aggressive during this time. So most decisions are focused on what the military is going to do, where the military is going to strike next, okay? And those decisions are really lying in the hands of the second man, okay? So as far as a dictatorship, you've kind of got this like figurehead with Hirohito and Tojo pulling the strings. For example, like foreshadowing here, Pearl Harbor, that's really going to be entirely planned and executed by the military leader, not the emperor. The emperor really didn't have anything to do with that. So it's kind of hard to imagine, I guess, plans being executed without consulting the actual emperor or monarch, but that's kind of what's happening. Okay? Alright, so let's kind of now look at what Tojo is specifically doing, because now we're going to talk about, I have to put it back on duplicate, but we're going to talk about what actions are actually taken during the steps of this war, okay? Okay, we're going to start with Japanese aggression, because even though we mostly know Hitler's role in World War II, Japan's aggression actually starts a little earlier than Hitler's rise to power. Okay, Hitler's not really in power until like the mid to late 1930s. Japan starting their aggression in Asia much earlier. Something to kind of remind ourselves before I get into this, okay? We have a two-front war. Okay, most of us know this, some of us don't. World War II is fought on two different parts of the globe at the same time. Okay? It's being fought in Europe, it's being fought in the Pacific. Many of you have grandparents that fought in this war. Depending on where they fought, they had very different experiences. Not every person fought Europe, D-Day, Normandy, okay, trying to get to Hitler, trying to get to Germany, trying to free France. Many people were in the water, in the islands, in the jungles of Asia throughout the whole war. The connection is that Japan and Hitler are eventually going to work together, never like alongside each other, never to achieve the same goal. They're working together to distract their common enemy, us. Does that make sense? Like they form an alliance because it would slow us down, basically. Okay, so what does Japan start doing in the early 1930s? Many Japanese at this time believe they are ethnically superior to other Asian groups. Okay? Ethnically superior to other Asian groups, especially the Chinese. I guess in addition to that ego problem of theirs, they also at this time want to start taking land and resources for themselves from mainland China and really Asia as a whole. From mainland China and Asia. Okay, if you kind of look at the maps over here, Japan, if you don't know, is a series of islands like off the coast of Asia in the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so it's right over here. It's pretty large series of islands. It's not like small, but compared to China, it's nothing. It's nothing much. Okay, it's geographically not the largest space, but because they're building up their military and they're so military focused, they really do have a lot of power. Okay, now, are they powerful enough to perhaps conquer all of China? No. Are they powerful enough to conquer parts and regions of China, who is kind of economically devastated at this time, and absorb those resources for their own benefit? Yes, they are. And that's what they're going to start doing. So I want you to know, in the early 1930s, the Japanese invaded Manchuria, which is kind of like an eastern region of China, and they successfully established control. So that's kind of like their first step. Okay? Now, a few years later, okay, a few years into this occupation, they move further into China. Or farther into China. And they begin conquering even more territory in China. Now, one huge victory for the Japanese was in the city of Nanking. And it's known as the Nanking Massacre. But it's also unfortunately known as the Rape of Nanking. I'll explain what I mean by that. This wasn't just an example of like Japanese victory. It was a unfortunate example of Japanese brutality. Okay? Because while they are conquering the city of Nanking, they are very hostile and brutal to the civilians living there, especially the women. It's estimated that they raped and then killed hundreds of women a day, like during their charge at the city, which is really, really upsetting. Okay, and it kind of showed, and it's kind of an example of when I say they saw themselves as like superior and better than, they thought that was an okay thing for them to do. Okay, a quick little like global lesson, really quickly here. Okay, because I do like to introduce this idea, and I've probably said it before to y'all, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but a lot of times we generalize like Asians as like one group. Chinese, like some people typically just like Chinese, it's Chinese, this is Chinese, you know. You want to be really careful with that and politically correct, because if you look at an example like this, granted this happened like 60 plus years ago. There's a lot of tension though, even to this day, between some of those different ethnic groups in Asia. And while we maybe don't know fully and appreciate their differences, they do. Okay? So it could be offensive to someone who's Vietnamese or Korean or Japanese to refer to them as just strictly like Chinese instead of Asian. Does that make sense? Like, we don't have a huge Asian population in like Southeast USA, so we don't know those differences as well, but they do. Okay, and so just always try to refer, it's Asian culture. Not always is it, unless you know for a fact that it's Vietnamese or Thai or Japanese or something, then that's okay, of course. We do have a large Vietnamese population in Louisiana because of the post-Vietnam War. We'll talk about that later, but the fishing industry and the climate pulled people here. Okay. All right, continuing on. And just kind of wrapping up things with Japan. Japan continued conquering other nations and colonial possessions throughout Asia and the Pacific. Yes, they began invading and conquering other nations and colonial possessions throughout Asia and the Pacific. So they just kind of continue with their aggressions. Okay? Now, they're going to be continuing that as I'm about to introduce what Hitler's doing during that time. Okay? Nations and colonial possessions. Asia and the Pacific. So that has really nothing to do with Hitler or really us. We're not really in the Pacific. Okay? Of course, some of our territory is... I don't know if anyone remembers what islands we still own this time. The Philippines. Okay? So they might be brought into this eventually. Which is kind of where our conflict with Japan comes in. We'll talk about that later, though. Okay? Alright, so everyone understands what's happening with Japan. And this is a story most people don't understand about World War II. This is technically the beginning. Japan is a huge part, half the part of World War II. And we just don't, we're very Eurocentric. We don't focus on what's happening in Asia this whole time before we get involved. Yes?
So if you were to ask us, what started World War II, would you use?
No. I'm going to give you actually a date. Because no one's fighting Japan yet. I would argue World War II starts when the Allies start fighting back against the Axis powers. And that hasn't begun yet.
Causes and stuff.
Right. And we already went over the causes yesterday. In terms of the buildup of tension in Europe mostly. The spark will definitely be in Europe. And the United States will have nothing to do with it, actually. It's all, and we'll talk about that kind of starting today. But it's not a global conflict yet. So the World War doesn't start. So the spark, in the sense of the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in World War I, that's what brings all those countries into it. That's what makes it a global war. So that's what's going to start it, and we'll talk about that. So the start I'm gonna say is primarily with Hitler, but the build-up starts before him, if that makes sense. Okay, the tension is rising before he's involved. Okay. So let's talk about Hitler. I got some German terms for y'all, okay? Lebensraum. I'm not that good at German, but I think that's how it's pronounced. Lebensraum and Anschluss. We'll start with the first one. Lebensraum means living space. Okay? And Hitler, who, remember, due to the enabling acts, is now this chief dictator of Germany, right? Okay, the Führer. He would like more living space, or Lebensraum, for Germany's population to grow and to expand. And this is why early on he plans to one day take over nations such as Austria and Poland, okay, because he needs room for his German empire to grow. Remember, part of Germany's bitterness is post-World War I, how badly they were punished, yes? They lost territory at the end of that war. Hitler would like to get some of that back, but the way he presents it is, my people need room to grow. He tries to present it in this almost good light, but then he starts eventually invading places like the Soviet Union, and you need to grow that much, It's a big country. Anyway, so the Anschluss means political union. Okay? And this refers to Hitler's desire to form Anschluss with nations that already had large German populations. Okay? So he wanted to achieve or form Anschluss with nations that already had large German populations. So he's going to kind of first target these countries where he may already have some people or sympathizers living there that want to be part of Germany's empire. Okay? Now, keep in mind this whole political union thing, it's kind of implied in a peaceful context, not an invade and conquer and take over. If he wants to achieve Anschluss, he would like you to submit to Germany. He would like that country to agree to be part of the German Empire. Yes? Now, let's say they don't agree. Is he prepared to take you by force? Yes. But that wouldn't really be that peaceful union he's hoping for. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions so far? Okay, these are his goals in the beginning. Here's how he carries them out. He's going to first eye Austria. Why would that be kind of a easy or obvious decision for him? It is smaller, but he's from there. He has history, his connections, right? He's Austrian. Austria's looking at him like, wow, one of our own is now the dictator of Germany, So, he's first going to set his eyes on Austria. There's a fairly large amount of Germans living in Austria at this time, and he would like to annex it so that it would become part of Germany. So he enters into diplomatic discussions with the with the Austrian leaders. And within about a month, Austria does agree to become part of Germany. Willingly. The leaders, anyway, agree. So does Hitler achieve Anschluss with Austria? Yes, pretty much, okay? How many of you have seen The Sound of Music? Ooh, good movie, right? Okay. That movie, this is kind of the premise of that movie in the background. Obviously, the movie is way more about fun songs and Maria von Trapp and the cute little family with their So Long Farewell dances. But in the background, the movie is taking place in Austria, okay? And Captain von Trapp is a military officer for the Austrian army. And the movie is during the time when the Nazi Germans take Austria for it themselves because Austrian leaders have agreed to give it to him, okay? And so then Austria's military must now become part of the German military. And Captain von Trapp is not very fond of the idea of being German because he feels like he's Austrian. Okay, his connection is to Austria. So the whole end of the movie, when the family's running away, is because the Nazis are trying to force von Trapp into the German military, and he doesn't want to fight for them in this war. So they go run into the hills after the convent chase scene. Yes, it's a very intense scene, and they're hiding behind the grave markers, I think. And Rolf, turns him in. Traitor. So upsetting. Anyway, okay. Any questions about Austria? Okay, is Hitler going to stop with Austria? No. Okay. He's next going to set his eyes on Czechoslovakia. And we will need to work on the spelling and pronunciation of Czechoslovakia. Question, Madison? Okay. Now, there were a large number of Germans living in a certain part of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. Okay, so it's just a certain strip. It's kind of the strip that borders Germany. Yes?
Are we going to talk about
Eventually, yes. Okay. In terms of Czechoslovakia, it's not that hard. I promise. I'll work with you. Okay. You gotta get used to this CZ thing, but then it's pretty easy. It's very phonetic. Okay. So he wants to annex the Sudetenland, obviously. That's what he has his eyes on. Now here's the thing. Czechoslovakia does not want to give Hitler the Sudetenland. Okay? They don't want to give Hitler the Sudetenland. So they're not really about this whole Anschluss idea, like Austria was. Now, here's the side note that's kind of important. So it's not really a side note, it's a note. But in the background. Czechoslovakia is allies with France at this time. They are allies with France. And France is allies with Great Britain. Remember the whole alliances issue we had in World War I? Okay, like if they fight you, I'll fight them because I'm your ally kind of thing, and it brings everyone into war. Okay. Technically though, because of that alliance, if Hitler is to try to take the Sudetenland by force and Czechoslovakia goes to war, who should be backing them up? France. Okay, and then who should be backing France up? Great Britain. Plus, shouldn't France and Great Britain be fighting Hitler at this point anyway because, oh wait, he's not even supposed to have a military? Like they should be trying to stop him, right? Okay, remember that term we went over yesterday, giving in to someone's demands to avoid conflict? What's that called? It's one of the causes of the war. Appeasement, good. Okay, this is where appeasement comes into play. Okay? So France is allies with Czechoslovakia. Britain's allies with France. France and Great Britain do not want war. They do not want war. So they want to work with Hitler on this. They want to meet with him. Okay? So we have what's called the Munich Conference. And I don't need you to know any of these names. I repeat, I do not need you to know any of these names. I need you to know the Munich Conference. Okay? They want to meet with Hitler and talk to him diplomatically. So they meet him at what's called the Munich Conference. It's basically a meeting. I mean, we could recognize these countries, though. I mean, Neville Chamberlain, I don't know if y'all... He's the British Prime Minister, like, early on in the war. Winston Churchill's not a thing just yet. Okay? I mean, Neville... Like, if you know that name from Harry Potter, then sounds like a British name, right? Okay. Edouard Daldier is French, obviously. Mussolini we know is Italy. Why is Italy there? Hitler wants a bud, I guess. Adolf Hitler. We noticed that Czechoslovakia is not invited to this conference at all, so it's really just these four superpowers in the region, okay? And they just want to have a little toddy-taw about Hitler's recent... aggressions and decisions that he's kind of taking these territories. Yes. Now again, do Great Britain and France want war right now? No. Okay. So what are they going to do? Just like the young mom gives in to her kid at the grocery store line, appease. They're going to appease him. Okay. They are going to tell Hitler, we will allow you to take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia if you promise not to go any further. If you promise not to go any further. This is kind of a weak sauce decision, to be honest with you. Okay, they're kind of wimping out a little bit. They don't want to go to war. But is Hitler going to stop? No. They're just teaching him that they're giving in to his demands, right? So it's kind of setting us up for a bad situation. Okay, what time is it? Wait. 9:09. Thank you. Okay. So the last thing I wanted you to know about the Munich Conference is that it's decided at this conference that Poland would be protected at all costs by the Allies. Okay? They it's in the wind that Hitler has his eyes on Poland next. He's gotten the Sudetenland, he's gotten Austria. He actually wasn't even supposed to get the rest of Czechoslovakia. He eventually, within like the year, invades the rest of that and takes it for himself. But they kind of have it in the wind that he has his eyes on Poland next. So Great Britain and France basically make a pact with each other. Like, if Hitler attempts to touch Poland, we will go to war. We will try to stop him at that point. That's the last straw kind of thing. Yes? Last stand. Okay. So where's Hitler going next? Poland. Okay. And that's what we're gonna pick up. So I don't know if y'all have a bullet that says so let's review so far, but y'all don't need really one. It's just kind of like everything we already went over, so you don't need to retype this at all. France and Britain following a policy of appeasement, the objective being to maintain peace in Europe by making limited concessions to German demands, like giving in to him basically. Neither Britain or France military ready to fight, yada yada. Okay, countries attending decide to make sure they protected Poland at all costs. All right, let's look at Poland. Now, when Hitler came to power, and by the way, there are many years on this slide to show you a perspective on the timeline. There's one date you will need to know, and I will specify what that date is. I promise. Not this one. Okay, when Hitler first came to power, the first thing he did was sign a non-aggression pact with Poland. Okay, he signed a non-aggression pact with Poland. Now, all this basically means is he promised to leave them alone. Okay? And he did this on purpose. Does he plan to leave them alone? No. He's lying, but he wants them to think he's going to leave them alone because he doesn't want Poland to form an alliance with the Allies. Okay? Because we're kind of backtracking here. This is when we're kind of like, this is happening early on, years before he even invades Austria. Okay? So he doesn't want Poland to form an alliance with the Allies. Okay. In an interesting twist, okay, he also signs a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. Okay, he's also going to sign a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. Now, why does he do this? He has every intention to eventually invade Poland, which is on the way to where? The Soviet Union. Does he want the Soviets feeling threatened when he moves east into Poland? No. He wants them to know, I have no intention to go after you. He'll later invade the Soviet Union, by the way, which is very unintelligent of him. Very bad. Like, we've seen Russia, map of Russia before. Do you want to invade Russia? Like, is that really the thing you do in the best mindset? And it's very cold as well. Much colder than Germany. Okay, anyway. So he also signs a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, hoping to deter them, or hoping to, like, calm them down for when he eventually invades Austria, okay? Eventually invades Poland. Okay. This is the date I want you to know. This is the last note we'll take. September 1st, 1939. On this date, what action is taken? Very good. Yes. On this date, Hitler invades Poland. Okay? This date is what I would like us to consider as the start of World War II. Because within days, what's the immediate response? As promised at the Munich conference. Great Britain and France are going to declare war on whom? Germany, Hitler. Okay, very, very good. Okay, so within days, Britain and France are at war with Germany. Okay, and we will pick up tomorrow with how Hitler was able to get his German people on board with this, because this isn't really Anschluss. This is a full-on invasion, and the non-aggression pact was public knowledge. So how is he able to convince them, it's okay, I can sign a non-aggression pact promising I will leave a country alone and then deny it and invade it anyway? Makes your leader look like kind of a jerk, right? Why are you on board with it? Because he tricks them. And we'll talk about it tomorrow, okay? Any questions? Alrighty.